Speaking with confidence isn't just for professional speakers or naturally outgoing people. It's for anyone who has a message to share. But for so many of us, the idea of speaking, whether it's in a video, on a podcast, or in front of a room full of people, it can feel intimidating. What if we mess up? What if we don't sound polished enough? Today, I'm chatting with Cat Matson, a speaking coach who helps people find their voice and speak with confidence without putting on a fake persona. We're covering some of the biggest challenges people face when speaking, like managing nerves, ditching the script, shock horror, and making an impact while still sounding like yourself. So, if you've ever felt nervous about putting yourself out there or worried that your voice isn't good enough, this episode is for you. Kat's insights are going to change the way you think about speaking. And by the end, you'll feel ready to show up and share your message with more ease and confidence. Welcome to the Powerful Content Podcast, your go-to source for content creation, strategy, and business inspiration. I'm your host, Mel Daniels, content strategist, coach, and speaker, empowering women across the globe to grow their business with powerful content that connects, nurtures, and converts. So, if you're ready to create standout content that gets you noticed and remembered, or build an aligned audience who love you and are ready to buy from you, you're in the right place. I believe that content has the power to connect us all. It's up to you how you use it. Listen in for genuine and insightful chats with guests, as well as practical tools and strategies from me. It's so lovely to have you here. Let's dive into the show. I acknowledge the Wongal people of the Eora Nation as the traditional custodians of the country that I am recording from today. I recognise their continuing connection to the land and waters. I pay my respects to elders past and present and extend that respect to all First Nation people listening today. Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to episode 154 of the Powerful Content Podcast, and a huge, very warm welcome to my very first guest for 2025, speaking coach Cat Matson. Welcome to the podcast, Cat.
Thank you so much, Mel. It's awesome to be here. And how privileged am I to be your first guest for 25?
What a guest to have, can I just say? We connected probably last year sometime when I was a guest on your podcast, Speaking with Confidence. And I'll make sure I link that episode in the show notes. Go and check out that episode, but go and check out all the other amazing goodness that Kat talks about as well. Everything and anything about speaking you want to know, you will find it in her podcast. So make sure you go and check it out. But if I'm going to be a little bit honest, Kat, I am a little bit nervous interviewing you today, given your area of expertise. But I know that I'm going to pick up plenty of amazing ideas, along with my listeners as well, that I can implement into my own speaking journey as I continue to grow as a speaker as well. So my very first question to you, Kat, is why speaking? What is it about speaking that you love so much that it makes you want to help and to teach other people as well?
It's a ripper of a question. And it took me a while to figure out why actually this was so important to me. In fact, it took me a while to figure out that this was my thing, if that makes sense.
Ah,
So I have been speaking on large stages, small stages, in one on one groups like forever. In fact, I remember when I was a kid, I was organizing the school, in the school holidays, I'd be organizing all of the neighborhood kids to put on performances. I'm a performer. I have no issue with standing on a stage and speaking what I think. And I've always been relatively provocative and always been not one to buy into what everybody else is saying about a topic. But when I was in the public service, I had this spectacular role. I was Brisbane's chief digital officer from 2014 to 2020, and it was a figurehead role. It was a role where I got to stand on a lot of stages and engage with a lot of audiences in a lot of different ways. And I was really good at that. Like that was my happy place. But part of the role was also meant to be policy reform and direction and guidance in the public sector. And what would happen was I would keep rocking up to my CEO with these fantastic ideas, and I would go, and he would look at me and go, mm-hmm, Kat, can you write me a briefing note? And I'm like, what do you mean, write a briefing note? And this pattern repeated for months, and I got so frustrated. And anybody who's ever worked in the public sector knows that briefing notes are actually really important. But what I realized was it's all good and well to be an entertainer on a stage, which is what I was good at, but it doesn't count for enough when you can't make yourself understood at the decisions that matter, in the conversations that matter. And the more I kind of watched this play out, I realized that in the public sector, in fact, in any decision making context, the people who succeed, the people who make an impact, the people who get promoted, the people who build their businesses, the people who have all of the success that they want, they are no more experienced, qualified, cleverer than the person next to them. The difference is they can speak and they can speak in a way that they are understood. So I sat back, ate a little bit of humble pie, and went, well, if even I, who is a good speaker, like I'm an excellent facilitator, if even I am having this trouble being heard in these conversations, then so is everybody else. And so over time, I developed my curriculum and my program. And that's why I'm now so hot and bothered about speaking, because I'm convinced that it is the number one professional skill that makes the difference between getting what you want and not.
I have so many questions stemming from that short introduction to yourself and your journey, Kat. My first question is you mentioned how you are a natural performer and you love being on stage. But I wonder though, can anyone be a good speaker or does it really depend on your personality? And I'm particularly looking at my introverts here. What does it take to, I guess, have the confidence to be able to speak?
Yeah. So the first answer to the first part of that question was yes. Anyone and everyone can develop the skill to speak confidently. The distinction is, and I talk about this a lot, it's with authentic confidence. Somewhere along the line, we have learned in our society to put a higher value on the charismatic
Mhm.
extroverts who can take a stage and perform. Hands up, I get that. I get that that's me. But some of the most powerful and I'm going to say impactful people that I've worked with have been the quiet, introverted, well researched, well studied people who, once they know how to articulate their insights, can deliver it authentically, quietly, without fanfare, in a way that is heard. So, for example, I did some work last year with a bunch of CSIRO scientists, awesome, like deep, deep, deep scientists. I was obviously brought in because they weren't speaking in a way that could be understood by their listeners. But once I finished working with them, they were all nailing not only the academic conference presentations, but the one on one conversations where, they bump into somebody waiting for the lift and they're able to very quickly explain why their research is important, why their research should be funded for the next round, and so on. So, yes, even the introverts can develop the skills. And again, this goes back to the question of why do I do this? Because speaking is a skill. Speaking with impact is a skill, but it's not a talent. My talent for being willing to embarrass myself on a stage, that's not what gives me the power to speak. I discovered that in the public sector. Like I had to go back to basics and go, how do I actually make myself heard as distinct to, "Oh, Cat, you're so confident." That's a different thing. That's a completely different thing. So, yeah, speaking is a skill and it can be learned.
Oh, such an interesting perspective there. But I'm just going to pick out something that I already feel is a theme, Kat, and that is speaking is about being understood by your listener. And I think that if there's something that people can take away from this episode today, it is around that it is about being understood. It's not about how well you perform or how amazing your presentation slides are. It's about being understood by your audience. Now, actually, before we continue, Kat, I would just love to clarify something. What do we mean when we're talking about speaking? I'm assuming that we're not just talking about standing in front of a live audience, because you just mentioned, these scientists being able to articulate their research in a lift when they meet someone. So, what do you want the listeners to think about when we talk about speaking?
I'm going to say every time you open your mouth, every, every time Every time you are having a conversation with someone where it's an opportunity for you to influence, to change minds, to inspire action. Um, and the reason I talk about, changing minds and inspire action is I tend to work with a lot of humble leaders, aspiring change makers, people who, good hearted people who want to make an impact in the world. And they often get frustrated that it's the big, bold, loud, audacious people who are getting all the attention, but they actually don't necessarily know what they're talking about, right? Like they've got all the showmanship, and other people are sitting here going, um, actually, I have something to share here. And so again, this I saw this so clearly in my public sector experience. Our opportunities to influence happen in micro conversations. It's in the lift well, it's in the lunchroom, it's in an Instagram reel, it's in a podcast, it's in a client conversation, it's with a prospect conversation, it's standing on a stage, it's introducing yourself at a networking function. Like it's literally every time you open your mouth with the intention of, I want to move the conversation forward. I want you to think something that you don't currently think, whether that something is I want you to take action on climate or whether I want you to consider me as a supplier. Like it's everything.
Yeah, I love that perspective as well. You've already mentioned so far that speaking is a powerful way to not only get yourself heard, but be seen as a thought leader or an expert, or to be able to impart your knowledge, or just said to influence, to change minds, or inspire action. And I talk about thought leadership back in last week's episode. If anyone wants to go back and listen to that, 153. But how do you think that we can actually use speaking to our advantage to build authority in our industry? So I guess what I'm asking is it a little bit of that showmanship? Is it a little bit of knowing your subject matter? Is it a matter of, I don't know, overcoming our fears? What is it?
Oh, this is such a juicy question. So it's not knowing your subject better. And I want to rule that one out first of all, because if anyone's even thinking about thought leadership, if anybody's even thinking, oh, I want to establish myself as a credible authority in my field, you already know enough. How do I know that? Because you wouldn't be thinking it if you didn't. Like it's a flat out. And women in particular, we are terrible at thinking, oh, I just need to know a little bit more. No, you don't. You know enough. And when you're a thought leader or when you're establishing yourself as a credible authority in your field, you're establishing yourself as that credible authority with your current knowledge, with your current expertise, and with your personal insights, however you've gained them. So, how do you do it? Well, I'm a big fan of course, getting speaking engagements, whether it's at your local networking events, whether it's on industry panels. In fact, panels are awesome because when you're on a panel, you don't have to hold the stage. You get to riff with other people, and I've I love moderating panels, and I always say to my panelists, this is literally like a boardroom conversation amongst peers. It just so happens that other people are watching us, but just relax and enjoy. The other way that I think you can establish that thought leadership or that credible authority is create your own speaking stage. And this is where social media is
Ooh,
awesome.
I
Like
love this.
whether it's, podcasting or your Instagram reels or your LinkedIn videos, just go live or pre record. I'm a big fan of going live. You know why? Because you can't faff around for hours editing. It's just like, I said what I said. Did it. I did it. But when you speak to a industry issue, an industry theme, an industry perspective, you're demonstrating your credibility. And there's so many things that happen when people see you speak versus read a post. They can see who you are, you're building rapport, you're building connection, you're demonstrating that you know what you're talking about, and there's a warmer invitation in terms of, oh, actually, yeah, I want to talk to that person. So I'm thinking in particular of a client of mine who came through my Impactful Presenters program right back at the beginning, and she's in the local fashion. supply chain. She shows local Australian fashion designers how to onshore their design and initial lines. And she was getting frustrated that she saw all of these other people who knew less get up on these stages and talk blah, blah. And she's like, Kat, why aren't I getting these invitations? And feedback was pretty quick. She said, I actually talk so fast and I give people so much information that their eyes just glaze over and they just can't cope. And so that's why she wasn't getting invited. After she'd gone through the program and she learned how to slow down, to give people less, to speak, to be understood rather than dump every single thing that I know about my last 25 years of experience. Once she mastered all of that, not only was she being invited to speak at local events, but at international fashion festivals because she's the leader in the industry. She just needed to learn how to articulate it. So that was a rabbit hole. How you establish that thought leadership is just by speaking about what it is that you know on whatever platform you, I was going to say, are comfortable with, you have access to. Most
Mm.
people aren't comfortable with it, and the only way you get comfortable with it is by doing it.
That's so true. And I loved at the beginning of that answer as well, Kat, you were talking about that women in particular never feel like they are good enough or they don't feel like they're ready. And I guess this is a reminder, and I said this in my episode last week as well, that you are already ready. Everything that you have right now is everything that you need to be an expert and a thought leader. And today, Kat is imparting her wisdom to give us some ideas and some tips on how to actually articulate that, how to go about that through the medium of speaking. And I just think it's such a powerful tool for us to be able to learn and to be able to, like you said, connect with our ideal clients as well. Because when we're thinking about that client journey, when we connect with our ideal client, we get them on our email list, we nurture them, and then they convert, it's that connection piece that is so, so important. Because if we don't connect, if they don't identify with us and what we talk about and our perspective on the world, then they're never going to come on that journey with us in the first place. So I love all of that, Kat.
And I think this is key too, Mel, that, it's at we misunderstand that people are not coming to us for our information. That's Googleable. That's chat GPTable. That's not what they're coming to. They're coming to us for our wayfinding. They want us to help them navigate through the information. And so when you speak, when you talk about your personal journey, how you got where you did, you're building rapport and people go, oh yeah, that's my person. Or they
Mm,
also go, "Oh, no, that's not my person."
mm,
And that's actually just as important. Like, it's a Harry Potter sorting hat kind of thing. The more you show up, the more you sort people out of your house,
Oh,
which is perfect.
I love that analogy. I'm so going to use that one. That's brilliant, Kat. I love it. So, besides imposter syndrome, so what I'm hearing here is a lot of entrepreneurs don't feel like they're good enough or ready enough to be able to speak. I also feel like that perhaps nerves might be one of the biggest blocks when it comes to speaking, because I remember the first time I ever did a Facebook Live, I almost vomited afterwards and I had to go and lay down. I literally had to go and lay down because I was so overwhelmed by the experience and the nerves that I felt leading up to it. So, why, I guess, firstly, do we even get nervous and what can we do to help ourselves to reframe those nerves from something negative to something positive?
Yeah. So why we get nervous at a very fundamental level is because we think there's a threat. We think,
Yes.
um, yeah, like it's the fight or flight response. And we think it's a threat because, well, and this is the interesting part, we have to go, what am I fearing? What do I think is the threat? Is a bear chasing me? Is my life at threat? And you go, no. What's at threat? Oh, I'm scared I'm going to be rejected. Because
Mm,
it's really what it comes down to when it's speaking. Oh my goodness, what if, and we've got all of the different variations. What if I say something wrong? If I look stupid? All that, it all comes down to what if I'm rejected?
mm,
What if you are? What if you are? Again, the Harry Potter sorting hat. What if you are? That, like, there's a part of me that goes, okay, great, next. But how do we, that's all good and well to say in theory, but when that's actually happening,
mm.
I actually had that moment yesterday. I was recording a video proposal for someone, which I do all the time, but I know this person and my nerves. And I literally had the conversation with myself. Why are you so nervous? Oh, because it's Brit and she knows me. And so that fear of rejection is more personal, right? So there's my first tip for managing it. Have a conversation with yourself. I just pause and go, what's going on? What am I fearing? What do I think is about to happen? What is it that I don't want to have happen? I will then often then go down that logical level and go, is that likely to happen? What would happen if it did? Is my life at threat? Is my life at risk? No, it's not. Okay, let's just do it. If it is a bigger deal, then I'll take a few moments and go, actually, maybe I'm not prepared enough for this one. Maybe I need to, take a little bit more time. The other things that I talk about for managing nerves is breathing. I know this sounds silly and it sounds basic, but when you are nervous, your nervous system has kicked into a fight or flight response. And when you've kicked into a fight or flight response, when you notice that, you notice the redness coming up your chest, up your neck, you notice the sweating, and if you're then stressing about that, what happens? You perpetuate the fight or flight response. So instead, you need to put in place physiological responses to let your nervous system know that you're okay. So breathing is actually really powerful. When you breathe deeply into your belly, you are telling your nervous system, we are safe. We are okay. The other thing to do is plant your feet on the ground, both feet. When I see public speakers hit a stage and I can tell they're really nervous, what are they doing? They're rocking or they're pacing, which again perpetuates that notion of fight or flight. I'm about to run. Plant your feet. Plant your feet. And then my final tip, and it's all related to this nervous system management, is slow down. Because again, when you're speeding up, you're just activating that fight or flight response. So you slow down. So, breathing, grounding, slowing down, one, it activates your mind to go, okay, we're all right. But the other thing it does, it literally activates your nervous system to say, we're cool. It's all right. We're not being chased by a bear.
I love those 3 tips, and they're so easy when you think about it to implement. And if we can be aware of what's happening and aware of our nerves, then by breathing, grounding, and slowing down, I think they're 3 amazing tips that we can implement to help our speaking. Now, I also think, Kat, that a lot of people worry about messing up when they are speaking. And I know that you have a very funny viewpoint on this, but what if someone feels like they are stumbling over the words or they are worried about, forgetting what they are going to say? Is writing a script the best way to prepare? Oh, it's a hard no.
That's a hard no. That is a hard no. So, yeah, I'm not a
Tell
fan
us
of
why.
scripts. I'm not a fan of scripts. And the
Mm.
reason I'm not a fan of scripts, well, there's probably two key reasons. The first is when you are reading from a script, you've disconnected from your audience and you are focusing on your content and no longer on, literally connecting with your audience. Help, being Ensuring that you're being heard by your audience requires that you're aware of your audience. And when you're reading a
Mm.
script, you're not aware of your audience, you're aware of your content. The other reason why I'm not a fan of scripts is if the argument for having it is to calm your nerves, but then you lose your place in your script, what happens? It's worse because then you're scrambling to find your place again. So I'm a massive fan of being far more relaxed and more conversational when we're speaking. And when we're doing that and we're focusing, say, on our key messages, when we're focusing on being of service to our listener, how can I help my listener today? It's far less about the content and it's far more about helping them. The other thing where all this comes to, or kind of if I was to lift it up at a really macro soundbite, the mistake that we make most of the time when we're speaking is that we prioritize our content over connection. We think it's about our information. We think it's about, I've got to land all of these key points and I've got to land them perfectly. And it's not about the content, it's about your connection. And so when we flip that and when we prioritize connection, we're not worried about landing that perfect example or delivering that particular passage word perfect. We're instead calibrating our audience. We're looking at their eyes. We're seeing how they're responding. Even when we're doing a video to say Instagram where we can't see them, we're imagining ourselves having a conversation with our ideal client and we're imagining them nodding at us and smiling at us and we're having a conversation because we're focusing on the connection, not on the content. So yeah, I don't like scripts because it takes us out of connection and acting like we're Google.
So many things there that really align with what I think as well, Kat. I don't even know where to start with this, but I love the idea of being of service.
Mhm.
And I love the quote about we think it's about content, but it's really about connection. It is. It's about the human. It's about the human on the other end of the piece of
Yeah.
content that you're delivering, but it's really about that human and about the connection with that human. So if you don't recommend writing a script, is there any other ways that we could perhaps start to feel a little bit more confident when we speak without writing everything out word for word?
Yeah. So I talk about my post-it note method where I will literally have a handful of post-it notes with my key messages on them. And those key messages are written in Sharpie, like permanent marker, not biro. And the reason for that is I want it big. So I can just glance at it and go, oh, yeah. And then reconnect, make eye contact, stare down the camera, whatever it is. I see people fill out their post-it notes with biro and I go, you've just written yourself a script that you now can't read again. Like that's not the point. When the other reason for using permanent marker on a post-it note is it forces you to only use a couple of words. And when you're only using a couple of words, you're focusing on your key message as distinct to all of the detail and all of the rabbit holes and all of the different examples and all of the different statistics that could possibly be used to demonstrate your point. You're focusing on your key message. We underestimate how much we know and that all we need is those little triggers about our key message. And our key messages are the ones that are going to move our audience in this moment closer to where we want them to be compared to where they are now. And when we then just focus on those key messages, the right stories will occur to us, the right statistics or the right proof points will occur to us in the moment because we're focusing on connection and moving our listener through a journey. So, yeah, a handful of post it notes. Or the other thing that I do, I kind of park little ideas on my fingers so I can count, you know, key point number one goes onto my index finger, key point number two goes onto my middle finger, and so on. And so then I can just tap my thumb to my fingers as I move through my key messages. And it's just
Hmm.
it's a way of physicalizing, I guess, that mental process.
I like those two tips. So post-it notes with Sharpies and using your fingers to kind of ground the key messages that you have.
Yeah.
So we have spoken about a couple of challenges that people may have when it comes to speaking. We've spoken about nerves. We've spoken about talking without a script. Can we briefly touch on this idea? And I guess it goes back to the idea of we are already ready, but this idea that we need to show up as someone else. We need
Mm.
to show up as the person who has it all together, the person who has the perfect slideshow, the person who can speak without saying, what would you say to someone if they feel like they need to have that in order to be able to speak?
You don't. Flat out, you don't. What I say to people when they raise that with me, I go, so when were you impressed by someone like that? When did someone like that motivate you to do something different? And there might be a time when you've seen a keynote speaker or a TED speaker do such an incredible job that you're like, oh my goodness. But then there will be hundreds of other people who you go, oh, I really like what they're about. I really appreciated that person's conversation. I really like that manager's approach. The picture that we have for impactful speaking of like a Simon Sinek or a Martin Luther King or a Brene Brown, they are so few and far between, and that is not the norm. You have been impressed many times over by people who haven't been as polished as Brene Brown. And I would argue that for most of us who aren't trying to sell millions of copies of books, people actually don't resonate. Well, they might really love a Brene Brown presentation, but they're not going to call her up and say, hey, can you work with me? Because it's way too daunting, right? People actually want to connect with other people like them. So, oh, thank goodness you're not perfect. Thank goodness you're not that person on stage who would be completely intimidating. So it it's a really interesting standard that we set for ourselves, that we think we have to be like them in order to be an impactful communicator. It's not about not saying and it's not about a memorized TED talk. And let's face it, that's what TED talks are. They are memorized. They are 12.5-minute memorized presentations. That's not what it's about. That's not the natural environment. The natural environment is a conversation, is a dialogue. There are unanticipated questions. There are unique circumstances, and impactful speakers will, because they know how to collect their thoughts and because they know their key messages and because they're sitting in that authentic place, they're able to adapt to all of those circumstances rather than being pitch perfect in a presentation style.
I love that. Polished is not the norm. Another quote from this episode. Polished is not the norm. Love it so much.
It's so not.
I have one last question for you. Well, I actually have a few, but this is probably my last question about this topic. I'd love to know from you, what do you think it takes to be seen as an authentic speaker?
Yeah. So I didn't realize just how important authenticity was to this work until I
Mm.
started doing it. And then I realized that everyone, well, so many, I shouldn't say everyone, so many people thought that they had to put on some kind of persona in order to be impactful. And actually, what makes a difference is when we're us. So, what does it take? It actually takes a level of comfort and confidence that you are enough. And on one hand, that sounds really simple, right? But I think it's part of the human condition to feel that we're not enough. And so, what it takes is to accept that right here, right now, in this conversation with this person, you are enough. Because if you weren't, you wouldn't be here. You don't end up in situations that you are deeply unqualified for, that you don't have a clue about. And when you do, you say, that's not my topic. That I can't contribute to that. So it's a trust that if you're in the conversation, you know enough and you are enough. And even though I'm a speaking coach, half of my keynote requests these days are how do you manage imposter syndrome? And that's all about how do you build authentic confidence and how do you remind yourself that you are enough.
Because you are enough. Yeah,
Of
love it.
we all are enough, and you are enough, and it's our comparing ourselves to other benchmarks that has us think that we're not enough. It's comparing ourselves to the people who are 5 years ahead of us or the person who looks really glitzy on Insta or whatever it is. It's the constant comparisonitis. Whereas if you compared yourself to where you were yesterday, you go, "Oh, yeah, I know more than I did yesterday. I'm
100%.
enough."
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. Such a beautiful, inspirational way to round out the episode, Kat. But before we finish up, I love to finish each episode with an opportunity for reflection for my listeners. So, Kat, do you have any questions that my listeners could perhaps explore to help them be able to maybe speak with confidence and authenticity?
Yeah. My first one would be if you had a TEDx audience or a TED audience, and if you were confident enough to take that stage, what would be the message that you would want to share with the world and why?
Love it.
You don't need to get caught up in the could I? It's just what would be the message.
Yep.
The second is how did you get to this point in your life? What are 5 stories, 5 points in your life that had you get to this point of caring about that topic? And how can you then tell those stories in a way that add to your credibility, not just externally, but to yourself? So when you're sitting there going, oh, I'm not enough, you can go, oh, actually, hang on a second. I've been there.
I love those questions. Thank you so much for sharing those. And I know that my listeners will absolutely love those and take a moment to reflect on those and be really, I guess, open to the answers that come to them as well. Okay, Kat, I would love to know, what are you excited for in the next few months? What's coming up for you?
Oh, gosh. I'm excited for my life flat
Yes,
out right now. Like I really am. I'm in a beautiful, beautiful purple patch, as a friend would call it. I've got some really juicy keynotes coming up, all about imposter syndrome. Actually,
fantastic.
I'm delivering that multiple times. I'm also working as entrepreneur in residence for Western Sydney University for an upcoming accelerator program, and that floats my boat because I love helping other people discover the joys of running their own business. And I'm excited about going to Bali in a couple of weeks.
I love that. That's definitely something to be excited about as well. Thank you so much for your generosity today, Kat, and for sharing your wisdom with my listeners. It's been an absolute joy to have you on the podcast.
Thank you. It's been a joy to be here.
Thanks so much for listening. That's it for another week. To get more powerful content in your life, make sure you're following along on socials. My handle is @meldbusiness. And just in case you're wondering, the groovy music for this podcast was created by Just Here on SoundCloud. I'd also be super grateful if you took a moment to rate and review this podcast so more amazing women like you can experience the power of content. And if you're like, hell Mel, stop talking, I'm ready to work with you now, here's how we can work some powerful content magic together. Firstly, come and join the Content Effect, my membership inspiring women with service-based businesses to ditch the content chaos and start creating stand-out content that gets you noticed and makes sales. You can join us by using the link in the show notes or just Google the Content Effect. The second way we can work together is via my one-on-one packages. We can create a sustainable content strategy or start to build out your client journey. It's up to you. Hop on over to meldbusinessservices.com.au/services to find out more. Until next time, have a beautiful week and embrace the power of your content.